Everything has a why. A sealed jar of honey can sit forgotten for years, even thousands of years, and still be perfectly good. Almost no other food can do that. So why does honey never spoil? The answer is not one clever trick. It is a stack of defences, some of them built by the bee itself. And hidden inside that word, never, is a darker truth most people miss. Start with what honey actually is. It is almost pure sugar, around 80% sugar and only about 17% water. Here is the strange part. That little bit of water is not free. The sugar grabs almost every water molecule and holds it tight. To a germ, honey is a desert. So when a bacterium lands in honey, something brutal happens. The honey pulls the water straight out of its body, through its own skin, until it shrivels and dies. It is the same reason jam on a shelf and salted, cured ham do not rot. Make something sweet enough or salty enough, and nothing alive can survive in it. But there is a catch. This only works while the honey is pure. Add water, and the trap weakens. Keep that in mind, because it matters later. Honey has a second defense. It is sour. On the acidity scale, it sits low, about as sour as orange juice. Too acidic for bugs like E. coli or Salmonella to grow. And where does that sourness come from? Not the flower, the bee. A worker bee adds chemistry to the nectar from a gland inside its own head. First, the bee adds an enzyme called invertase. It splits the big sugar in nectar into two smaller sugars. That is the chemical moment nectar becomes honey. Then comes the star enzyme, glucose oxidase. It slowly turns some of the sugar into acid and into a second germ-killer, hydrogen peroxide. For years, beekeepers knew honey held a mystery germ-killer. They even gave it a name, Inhibine. In 1963, scientists finally unmasked it. It was hydrogen peroxide. But here is the twist. In a sealed jar of thick honey, that enzyme barely works. The peroxide only really appears when honey is watered down, and even then it is hundreds of times weaker than disinfectant. So the peroxide is really a wound-healing trick for honey on a cut. The thing actually keeping your jar safe is the dryness and the acid. Some honeys carry extra weapons. Manuka honey, from a tree in New Zealand, is loaded with a compound called methylglyoxal that kills germs even when no peroxide is left. Bees even add a tiny antibiotic of their own, a molecule called defensin-1. And dark forest honeys pack plant compounds that pile on even more protection. Now, how does honey get so incredibly dry in the first place? The bees do it on purpose. Fresh nectar is mostly water. They pass it mouth to mouth, drying it a little each time. Then thousands of bees fan their wings over the comb, a living wind machine blowing the water out until only about 17% is left. When a cell is finally dry enough, the bees seal it shut with a lid of wax. That airtight cap is the bee saying, "This honey is finished and it will keep." Put it all together. Bone dry, acidic, sealed tight and laced with germ-killers. A pure capped honey is about as close to immortal as food gets. But remember, that darker truth, never spoils, does not mean immortal. It does not even mean clean. It means germs cannot grow as long as nothing goes wrong. Let water in, from a damp spoon or humid air, and the whole thing changes. Honey naturally carries sleeping yeasts. Wet it enough, and they wake up and ferment it sour. There is a quieter danger too. In roughly 1 jar in 10, honey carries dormant spores of a bacterium called botulism. Sealed in honey, they sleep. They cannot grow there. For you, that is harmless, but a baby gut is different. There, those spores can wake, grow, and turn dangerous. That is why honey must never be given to a child under 1 year old. And you cannot cook the spores out. They survived normal heating. One thing that is harmless, though, is crystallizing. Honey turning grainy and solid has not gone bad. Just warm it gently. Which brings us to the famous story, 3,000-year-old honey, found in Egyptian tombs, still good. The truth. What explorers actually dug up was a dark tarry residue. Not a golden spoonful anyone would eat, but the science underneath the legend is real. Sealed, dry, and acidic, honey truly is one of the only foods that can outlast empires. Never spoils really means nothing alive can move in until water lets it. A spoonful of honey is a tiny fortress, built by an insect, that can survive 1,000 years. And it is just one of 100 everyday things hiding a why. Everything has a why. Like and subscribe for more.